Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. Today I'm going to be creating some French country wall decor. For my project today, I'm going to be working on this little sign here that I had in my stash. It's actually from Christmas time. I'm going to remove the twine from the top, and then I'm going to be using Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in white. I'm going to be applying 2 coats on both the blank side here and also on the other side. This is going to prepare the surface for paint, but it's also going to block any sort of bleed through or the lettering that's on the other side. I'm going to be using a lot of lighter colors today, so I'm using a white primer, but you could definitely use a grey instead. When my 2 coats of primer were dry, I took out Paint Couture's Simply White chalk paint. I'm going to be laying down 2 coats of this on the front and the back as well. Now, I went with this white as I wasn't 100% sure exactly what tones I was going to be using for this project, so this is just a really great base to start off with. When my chalk paint was dry, I took out Redesign's Chantal Mould, and I'm going to be dusting that with cornstarch, and then I'm going to be using some Dust Air Dry clay. I'm going to begin pressing that in. You'll see that I sort of pull bits of clay away and I reposition it until I have all of the details filled, and then I use my fingers to push out the excess clay. I'm then going to gently flex the mold to help it release from the sides, and then I'm going to flip the mold over. I find that gravity is definitely a big help, especially getting out these more intricate molds. So I'm just gently folding that mold back to release my casting. I'm going to be having this one up the top of my project, so I'm just going to sit that in position. And then I took out Redesign's Madame Garland mold. I'm rolling my clay into a sausage sort of a shape there, and then I'm pressing it into one of the garlands there. There is a left and right design that I'm going to be casting. You can see I'm pushing that excess clay out with my fingers. Then I'm going to flex the mold, and just like before, I'm going to flip it over and carefully pull that casting out. I'm envisioning this casting going underneath the mold that I've already added, so I'm going to carefully move that over and have that on the right hand side, and then I am going to cast the other garland from that same mold. Now these are quite intricate, so if you have trouble getting them out, I suggest popping it in the freezer for about 10 minutes before trying to take your castings out. I then took out this beautiful Pastoral Toile stamp. This is from an older IOD release. I'm going to add some of my IOD permanent black ink, and I'm going to add that beautiful design in the center there. Now I'm adding this one first because I'm going to be building my molds in a design around it, and it'll be a little bit tricky to try and do that when I already have the castings down. I'm then going to use my hairdryer to heat set the ink for about 2 minutes on high. Now that I know how I want my castings to be laid out up the top, I am going to add some of my Sealy's Quickset wood glue to the back of my castings, and I'm going to position them in place. I did end up trimming a little bit of the garlands there off so that it met in the center a little bit better. There was a little bit of overlapping, so I've cut that off. And then I'm going to add some glue for the other one. Again, these are delicate, so I did have to be quite gentle. I went back and grabbed the Chantal mold again. I am, however, doing a partial casting. I just want the garlands or the greenery section. I don't want the little wreath or the bow. So you can see I'm just casting a smaller section of that. And then just like before, I'm flipping it over to release my casting. I am going to be positioning this underneath the beautiful Toile stamp that I've already used. So I'm just going to position that there. I haven't glued it down yet. And then I took out Redesign's Blooming Banners mold. I'm dusting that with cornstarch, and then I'm going to work my Dust Air Dry clay into that design. I really felt like this went with the overall sort of French regal look that I was going for. And then once I have that released, I am going to be positioning that one on the bottom of the design. So I did just have a little bit of a play there and work out my positioning. That's why I don't really glue things down until I'm completely happy with it. I am then going to reposition some of the bits of the garland mold there. You can see I'm taking that longer piece off on either side, and I'm going to actually move those a little bit further down. I want this to look like some laurels. I want it to look a little bit more balanced than it was. I'm going to do some partial castings here of that same Chantal mold and just build the design that I want want. So keep that in mind. You can reorganize your molds. You can cut them up to get them to suit your design that you want. So I'm just going to continue casting until I'm happy with how that looks, but I'm not gluing anything down until I am happy with it. Next, I wanted to add something in the corners, so I took out the Blooming Banners mold again. I'm going to dust the fleur-de-lis from that same banners mold that we've just cast, and I'm just going to be casting the fleur-de-lis sections, and I'm going to be casting 4 of those so that I have 1 in each corner. Once I have all of my castings organized, I'm going to use my same Sealy's Quickset wood glue on the back to glue everything in place. I have had some people saying that they aren't able to get access to the Sealy's Quickset wood glue that I use. Now, I have heard a lot of people have success with Titebond quick and thick glue, so that's definitely an alternative that you could use in your crafts instead. Once I finished gluing my castings down, I took out Redesign's Vintage Script stamp. I'm going to be pressing some of the French typography from that stamp into my still wet clay. I'm just adding a couple of random words here, just gently pressing it and arranging it in a sort of like a curved shape that complements the Blooming Banners mold. I let my clay dry overnight, and the next day I came in with Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin. I'm going to be going over the top of my stamped design first. Remember, we have heat set the ink there. So I'm going over the top of this so that I'm protecting my stamped design. And then I did also decide to go in and seal the rest of the project. I'm going to be layering in a lot of different colors and products. So I want to make sure that I've got a surface that I can wipe back any errors from. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Buttercream chalk paint. I'm going to be going over the top of all of the castings. I am going to be careful not to go over the top of the stamp design, but I do have that clear coat down, so I am able to wipe that back if I get any in those areas. I am going to keep the center part where we have the stamp design in that simply white tone. I really like to have a bit of tonal difference there, so we're going to keep the white there. And I'm going to be going in with a wet wipe, removing any of that excess paint. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Duck Egg chalk paint. I'm going to add a little bit of water to the lid, then I'm going to get a little bit of the paint on my brush, and I'm going to start layering it in around the stamped design. So I want the image to remain white, but I want the background behind it to have a blue cloudy sort of a look, almost like a blue sky. So I'm just going in and I'm going to layer it in. You'll notice I've started off quite light, and I did just keep adding the blue in those different sections until I was happy with it. Again, using a wet wipe to remove any of the paint from the areas that I don't want it. When the duck egg was dry, I did go back in with some more buttercream to tidy up any of the blue that's ended up on the laurel sections. I also went in and sealed the blue section again with some satin clear coat. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze. I'm going to begin up the top, and I'm going to be working that glaze into all of the details of those beautiful castings. You can see I'm using my mister to help that product move, and as I said, I am going to work in smaller sections, and I'm going to be then using a wet wipe to pull back some of the excess. I want it in the lower points. I also want it to create an sort of aged look, a halo around the castings. I am going for a vintage French panel style look here, so using the glaze definitely helps to achieve that. Now obviously, if this look wasn't for you, you don't like a vintage look, you could definitely leave the glaze part out. I, however, love the depth that it adds to a project, and obviously the more worn look. So again, I'm just going to continue to add that glaze. I'm going to be allowing the glaze to sit down into the stamped letter impressions as well down the bottom. I'm also then going to start adding glaze to the center part, but as you can see, I am wiping quite a bit of it off. I just want a hint of age in that particular section. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's British Grey chalk paint. I'm going to be adding it to some of the details. You definitely could have left it at the point where it was just the glaze. I definitely think that that already looks quite lovely. However, I did want to try and use a few more colors in my project today. So the British Grey is just going to go over the laurels up in the top section, and then also on the laurels that are surrounding the Toile image. So not over everything, but I think it is nice to bring in some different colors to sort of break up the design and emphasize certain sections as well. So I'm just going over the top. I only ended up doing one coat of this, and then I took out Paint Couture's Weathered Wood Antiquing Glaze. I'm going to go over the top of the sections that have the dry British Grey on them. This is going to deepen the tone, and it is also going to sit in some of the low points. We obviously still have the Van Dyke Brown Glaze, but this is a grey tone, so it's nice to bring in another tone to create a little bit more depth. So I'm adding it, really working it into the lower points, and then using a wet wipe to pull some of that back. I then added the glaze to the corner fleur-de-lis pieces, again wiping some of it back, and also to the fleur-de-lis in the bottom section. And then I started adding it to the Madame Garland castings. I am going to be keeping those in a lighter tone. They're not going to be getting the grey paint, but I like the grey tones that the glaze is giving those. It ties it together. And as you can see, I'm now also adding it to the laurels that we painted grey around the center image. Once I finished adding it to the laurels there, I also added it to the Blooming Banners mould down the bottom. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's French Gold Heavy Metal Metallic. I'm going to be adding it to that beautiful bow from the Chantal Mould. I'm adding that up the top, and I'm also going to be making sure that I'm getting it on the higher points as well, not just on the sort of front top sections. And then I also decided I would add it to the bows and the sort of like emblem or pendant style that's on the end of each of the Madame garlands there. And I'm also going to be adding it to the little fleur-de-lis in the corners as well, and then the little section of the garland there and the top section of the Blooming Banners mould. So just anywhere that I felt that I wanted to add a little bit more of a hint of gold. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Simply White chalk paint. I'm offloading the excess. I'm just doing a little bit of dry brushing over the top of the sections that we have the grey paint on. Now, I'm not going in too heavy. The reason I've done this is I felt like some of the depth and the details were a little bit lost underneath the grey paint and the grey glaze. So I just wanted to bring a little bit more of that back. The dry brushing is going to hit those high points and give us a bit more definition. I'm also adding it to the Madame garlands, the sections that have the florals, and obviously the mould up the top there, as you can see. I'm adding a little bit of the white to the banner section down the bottom, just a little bit, and then I decided I would go back in with a bit more of that weathered wood just over the top of the grey sections, just to deepen that tone a little bit more. But as you can see, we do have a bit more definition in the castings now. You can see the details that are on the leaves a little bit better, but we still have that sort of more moodier tone of grey now that we have the weathered wood glaze back over the top. When that was dry, I took out the Vintage Script stamp again. I'm going to add some black ink over the top of the first word, and then I'm going to clean off the excess ink, and I'm going to reposition it down the bottom. I just wanted to define the lettering down the bottom a bit more, so I'm going to press that into the impressions that we made previously, so pressing deep into those, and then I'm going to use a wet wipe to pull some of that back and soften it, and then I'm going to repeat the same process for the letters that come after it. When that ink was dry, I went back in with a little bit more glaze just to make sure that we still had that look of age down the bottom as well. I dried that off, and then it was time to have a look at the back. I'm going over the top of the 2 coats of Simply White with Buttercream chalk paint. I'm not going for full coverage. I want to see little bits of the white peeking through. And then I took out the Vintage script stamp again, and I decided that I would be adding some script writing to the back, just so that it's not just a plain back. There's a little bit of interest there. I'm just going to ink that up, and then I'm going to position that near the top and press down. I really think this is just a nice subtle touch. This is a piece that could definitely just be leaned against a shelf, or you could attach a hanger. I'm going to add another one of the script stamps underneath so it looks like it's a letter. And then I grabbed one of the other pieces from that stamp set that says Promise Note, I believe. That's just going to go up the top there, and then a little sign off script piece there that I'm going to add down the bottom. So ultimately I just wanted it to look like it was sort of like a letter, or maybe even an explanation of the artwork, just so that the back wasn't so blank. So I'm just pressing that down, and then I'm going to use my hairdryer to heat set that ink. Again, I tend to have it on high, and I have it there for about 2 minutes, just making sure that that's all nice and dried off. And then I'm going to be taking out Paint Couture's Extreme Garden Satin again, and I'm going to seal the back. Once my sealer was completely dry, I decided that I wanted to add some age. So I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze, just like we did on the front. I'm brushing that on, and then I'm going to use a wet wipe to help spread it, but also to wipe some of it back. So you see I'm sort of using circular motions there. I'm also using my mister. I wanted to have almost like a little bit of a halo look, so lighter in the center and then getting progressively darker around the edges, just overall creating that look of age. Finally, when that glaze was dry, I took out Paint Couture's French Gold Heavy Metal Metallic Paint again and a makeup sponge. I'm going to be dabbing that around the outside. This is something I like to do. It just creates a sort of subtle border. It also brings some interest to the edges as well. So I'm just going to be going around dabbing that on, allowing some of the gold paint to show not just on the edges but going up over the edges. And I will also be repeating the same process for the back. Now, if I was going to have this hanging, I would use this little gold eyelet hook here, and I would use some Gorilla Super Glue gel to attach it to the top. However, I'm happy for this to just sort of lean on a shelf. And here's a look at our finished wall art. I love how this turned out. It was really fun to layer those molds, to include that beautiful Toile stamp. Let me know what you think of today's project in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find a full product list and my affiliate links in the description below. Thanks for watching.